All right. Come on. Hey, everyone. We're in the middle of a discussion of whether or not ethics can be objective. Joe. And happy birthday to Tom, by the way. First, birthday boy.
Happy birthday, Tom.
Yes, das Geburtskind, a birthday child. Yes, and
my birthday flowers.
Oh, lovely.
These are from a bush out front. I grew them from buds.
Oh, so they're like from little sprouts to full blown flowers.
Well, no, from I cut them when they were just hard buds.
Oh,
and
okay.
they've opened up in the last couple of days. So
excellent.
But my birthday flowers.
Lovely. And Joe, hold that thought for just one more second. Sorry, Tom. Yeah, go ahead.
Nobody else is going to give me any, so I thought I'd give me some myself.
Yeah, of course. When you're single, you have to kind of date yourself and treat yourself so that, you get a chance to treat someone special and you get to feel special.
But who knows? I might get lucky tonight.
So very quickly, zum Geburtstag viel Glück, zum Geburtstag viel Glück, zum Geburtstag, lieber Tom, zum Geburtstag viel Glück. All right.
I can only do it. The only way I can do it is so Tom-chan, お誕生日おめでとうございます.
Oh, cool.
my name is Aim. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's about my only German. I tried, but it's the pronunciation gets me. Ich spreche ein bisschen Deutsch und Japanese.
In Japanesisch, yeah, cool.
Fast kein Japanese.
Ich spreche auch kein Japanese. Yeah.
Ein Serbischen.
Serbischen?
Serbischen.
Sehr bisschen. Yeah.
Or
Okay.
visceral if you're Austrian.
Yeah, they have a different pronunciation. Okay, poor Joe's been holding on to ethics are not an objective matter.
Also, I don't know how to say happy birthday in another language. And
you just do it in English.
I was toying with. I already did.
Oh, okay.
I was toying with doing Pig Latin, but decided against it.
Well, that's the language, I suppose.
Yeah, like we were talking about. What do you call it? What was the preface into this?
Objective. If ethics can be considered an objective standard, or
yeah. I mean, it's like there's no way that they could be completely objective, because even if Star Trek Planet of the Week, where all of the rules have the same. All of the rules in your ethics have the same punishment. All of your rules are, enforced either randomly or totally. It's still what is considered a rule, and that in your code of ethics or your code of laws still has to be determined by a consensus of people, and is always, what is and what isn't is always based on the wills of groups of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking,
sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Well, I was going to say hi, Laith, but then to reply to Joe, I have a little background in archaeology, so I think a little bit. Where do you go?
I don't know.
I think a little bit in terms of anthropology, and so when you're thinking anthropologically, you can't, you really can't have objective. Something that seems objective in one group is just obviously, the people in the other group would say, well, that's obviously wrong, because our ethic is different, and it's just as old and just as valid as yours.
Yeah, if I could maybe do a devil's advocate of how ethics could be considered objectively. Now, of course, Lonely Wolf was sort of like explaining the position of a libertarian. Mine isn't the same. So, I mean, and again, I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here as opposed to saying what my own opinion on this is. But I have seen speakers talk about things being objectively objective, which means sort of like it exists independent of human mind. It just is. And then there's subjectively objective, and then objectively subjective and subjectively subjective. So this idea that it's not just a dichotomy, but it kind of takes into account that there is a role for mind and not in some places. And so maybe in terms of, if I was to give the most charitable interpretation of objective morality, I would point to the fact that in repeated human societies across time and space, there are some basic things that go against the cohesiveness of a social group, such as murder, such as theft, that we find punished or, treated as a bad thing consistently. And so in that way, I could say that there is a very limited scope of behaviors that are consistently found throughout human societies. And then those could maybe be considered objective in that they can't merely be explained by subjective preferences everywhere, because other things differ, but these things are consistent. So that's probably the most robust counter position I could take to an objective set of ethics.
I don't see it. I understand what you're saying, but I don't. What is murder? That is societal. That in ancient Sparta, one of the things that a Spartan boy had to do in order to become a warrior, become an adult, was to murder a helot, murder one of the slave class in their state, and get away with it without getting caught. That was one of the tests. So that's murder, and it's accepted. It would be punished if it was caught, but it was required.
I should preface that or clarify by saying in-group. In-group murder, in-group theft, because obviously insider outsiders. Yeah, so that was a lack of precision in my language.
Okay,
and even what you're saying is assuming that the slaves are considered to be outgroup and not part of the society, and as they are required for the society to run, it's kind of a shit move morally to consider them an outgroup.
Although the Spartans did consider them an outgroup, they were obviously. I mean, it was either that, or you can look at it as a hierarchical system, and it's sort of like slaves and slave owners in this American South.
Yeah. I mean, the whole in-group, out-group thing changes the dynamic entirely.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was just trying to do give it a fair, not, be a foil against which people could react. So, hey, Laith, how are you doing? I don't know if you have anything you want to throw in. You kind of jumped into a middle of a random conversation, so. Oh, you're muted at the moment.
Oh,
yeah, Lonely Wolf, or did you want to jump in?
I am mic'd. Yeah, hello, guys. Apologies. Happy birthday, Tom.
Thank you. I was going to ask you to demand that you do that if you hadn't heard, but thank you. I appreciate it.
No, I did it before, but I was muted. Don't you know?
Oh, well, I felt it through the ether. I appreciate that too.
Oh, good, man. Oh, good. Yeah, you were saying Lonely.
Yeah, I guess the whole impetus for why we sort of brought that up was that because we started off talking about the book club thing. We're looking at the social construction of reality, and I've been looking at that, and one of the things that came out was intersubjectivity, and that's why that term came out to me, because I didn't, up until a year ago, I didn't know what it was, but when I was trying to sort of offer counterpoints, because I was sort of arguing with someone who sort of was under the impression that philosophy was something that was objective and, reality was objective. So I just sort of thought, okay, objective, subjective, and then the idea of the intersubjective. And one of the things that I love this analogy, it's the analogy of a cube. So imagine that all of you you didn't know what a cube was, like you didn't know the 3D properties or whatever. So imagine that someone's standing in front of the cube, so all they can see is a rectangle. So that's one person. Then the second person's on top of the cube, and he knows that he's on a square, but he knows it is elevated above the ground. And then a third person is looking at the side, probably the side, and they can see a corner, so like a line that goes down there, and like separately those three people are seeing something completely different. But then I guess that's a little part of the intersubjective reality, is how through the language they can share their experience, and then if they put it together, they can piece together and they can think, okay, so this must be what a cube is like. It must have like all of these sides, and they can figure out what the properties of this shape are that they've just encountered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That helps when they have a shared objective reality to interact with. But of course, if the experiences are subjective, then there isn't a sort of truth to be found, which makes it more contested, I think. For some
the
people.
cube is just like an easy. It's kind of an easy.
It's an intro.
It's sort of an analogy that gets you thinking about.
Mm.
Yeah,
if your friend is ever interested in like, just having the idea of what's subjective and what ain't subjective and stuff like that about philosophy, you should read like any of the early modern philosophers, Kierkegaard, Kant. If you can understand anything that they say there, you deserve to know the truth of the world. I wasted 4 years of my life trying to read what Kant came up with. And,
do you know that actual native speakers of German will read Kant in the English first?
Yeah. I don't want it to sound like I don't like being told that, but it is so common for German philosophy students to actually just say, "Oh, I've read Kant in English," don't you know, over anything else, because I tried to learn German specifically to read Kant in German.
Oh my God! Why would you do that? Like, first of all, like, okay,
because it's fun, and wow. I just thought that the 3-page long sentence that was devolved into 4 chapters in English sounded like
that's like trying to learn Russian so you can read War and Peace. It's like that's the sort of Sisyphean task. Embarking upon.
I learned three words that I learned. I think for Kant is Ding an sich.
Yeah, thing in itself.
So, and that is enough for me to wrestle with. I think I got it, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't even look at Kant. I mean, I've picked up a couple books by Nietzsche in the original German, but I'm still not there to even read something as much more accessible as Nietzsche, let alone Kant.
I mean, I like to read things that will combine all those people together. That's fine. There's a bit of Freud, there's a bit of Nietzsche, there's a bit of that. I've seen it in some books that I've read, but it's when you have to look at each of those individually, that's when you can go down a rabbit hole and you think, oh God, that's more than what I thought.
Like, I certainly think that, especially with Kierkegaard, the modern day like pieces on his work, they are much better than the actual work itself, because I mean, we talk about people talk about like income disparity and stuff like that. Kierkegaard is the definition of a bougie fuck. He lived in the middle of nowhere in rural Germany, like owned all the land around him and never left the place, and then decided to write high-level political discourse and the theory of language. He was an intelligent human being. I'm not going to knock him, but like, it's better when you interpret him through other people's perception and the 200-300 odd years that have gone on since he died.
Yeah, I think that's oftentimes people who approach philosophy, they think that sort of like the philosophical authors are kind of like the biblical authors. Like, here is this text and we must read it and accept it. And a lot of philosophy is done in the interactions between thinkers and unpacking ideas. And it's actually the work that follows on that is sometimes the more illuminating part of what happens in that philosophy.
It's the application of that's what makes me cringe. That's half my problem with the world, is the people who use it in such a poor way. And it's like, you kind of learn what something is by learning what it's not. I mean, that's the because I struggle to understand. Let's say someone like Peterson or someone like that, someone who keeps invoking postmodernism as as something he despises, and I've got my problems with some of the practice. I find that some of the practitioners, like the professors that I met, like during that, were very
Go a bit too far.
They seemed very elite. They seemed very bougie about their practice, and I found that they were making some really poor arguments. Because I guess my first experience with postmodernism was, we were learning educational psychology. So I'd done my maths, so I was learning to teach it. And so we did the psychology stuff, which was sort of a social psychology. But then when it came to the next semester, when we were looking at the sociology, it was mostly they were using Foucault, and they seemed to be using him, but they didn't have any answer to modern psychology or educational psychology. They seemed to be answering to the old practices of, the institutions were back in the time. So it just seemed such a disconnect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sadly, if you're ever interested in like looking up modern day stuff, it's sadly going to be like you're either going to need like basically an academic library card, like a library card to an academic to the philosophical journals and stuff, or a lot of money to spend. Like I've got access to the philosophy magazine, which is kind of like the big premiere one in Britain. Although I'm pretty sure that there's somebody from the British Philosophical Journal who's going to start like cussing me out and calling for my blood. But generally speaking, people don't write books in philosophy anymore. They write articles that go in journals.
Yeah, because what gets you your advancement these days? It's not books; it's journal articles. So the outputs start to
So the output gets changed, but then you wind up like missing on a lot of really awesome books or really awesome like pieces of like work. What's his name? He's a guy who worked on Hegelian dialectics, and he can write dissertation level stuff in about half a page because he compresses it entirely and he writes it all in logic. And as a result, he can only get his papers published in books. He's a cool dude, but yeah,
the whole way
Apologies.
the whole way that academic knowledge is locked up in a completely monopolized system is literally like a crime, because it's taxpayers and student tuitions that are funding the salaries, and also the grants comes out of tax money, and then the academics do their work, and then they hand it over to a private company that slaps a $34 or a $27 charge on every time. Even if I want to access my own articles, I have to pay. And the idea that all of that taxpayer funded knowledge wealth is then locked behind a paywall for a few publishers it's why there's a big push toward open science and open publishing and open access, to free up that stuff, and the acknowledgement that it's a moral wrong. It's like the burning of the Alexandria Library every day, when people are separated from medical studies and new information and other things that will just, historical analysis that's new, anything. It's one of my biggest irritants in life.
Also, it's a big problem why the law profession tends to have issues, as all of the case files are locked up in a similar way, and you need to pay per hour using it, and thus the only groups that can become law firms and that tend to be those that have to charge or get to charge, because the level of entry is so high, so much money, so the impoverished do not have access to nearly as good law.
Yeah, I mean, even when I send it off to a journal, the journal editor who looks it over and she might send it on or do a desk reject or whatever. She's not getting paid extra. The reviewers all donate their time. Then the article writer has to make all the changes. The reviewers have to sign off on it. They might have 2 or 3 rounds of letters back and forth. And then it's up to the primary author, me, of getting the article in the right format and typeset and everything else based on the journal's needs. They do one little copy proof, make an electronic version, maybe send out 250 journal copies to physical libraries, and then they just charge money for it. It's ridiculous. Sorry, Christy's going on.
I think I've hit the nerve.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to say what I was going to say then, because that would be.
I mean, the guy who released everything from his JSTOR is a hero to me, and I'm so sad that he committed suicide in prison. But he did the world a great service. You know, if you remember a couple of years ago.
I don't remember that. Was JSTOR made public for a while?
Basically, yeah. He downloaded everything from JSTOR and just uploaded it, kind of like the Napster version, but academic articles. And New York State went after him. And he had been on this campaign of like freeing academic information before. So, and they took him away, and they were going to just throw him in prison for putting out information on the internet. And I don't know all of the circumstances around it, but he ended up, committing suicide. Because he was hounded by the publishers and all these other people who claim they're for, learning. So I'll see if I can look something up on it.
Yeah, I was, if I could get my hands on, get access to JSTOR and Springer and that kind of stuff, I would be a happy camper. And I have some idea what you're talking about. What I was going to say though is when Lath was talking about things being in books, in magazine, in journals rather than in books. The advantage I was thinking there is that at least the published information is in a format, in a location where it can be analyzed, ripped apart, critiqued. And made better, at least made clearer what the issues are within a particular thing. Whereas a book is just kind of out there, and you can say anything you want, and it's if you want to get it published. If you want to get it popular, you maybe cut corners or embellish things and. So that was my thought, but your point about about journals then being locked up behind paywalls is entirely valid, and I think that in a better world we would have conversations like that at the national level, instead of conversations about who are people, who is and is not a person. That seems fairly basic.
I found the story. If you guys want me to share my screen with you, I can present now.
Check it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
All right, a Chrome tab, and
I guess the one interesting thing, it's kind of related, but it's about the public and its relationship with literature, but also with the arts as well, because with what's happened at the moment, because it's like a lot of statues, they no longer really have a place in the public realm, and so I guess the next discussion is, okay, what do we replace those? I'd want some furry statues. That would be like, that's my but I guess that may democratize the arts quite a bit, because you'll have people, having ideas of what, and it may unearth some new artists.
So
it would be okay if I got Stardust if you put Stardust up as a bloody, what's his name? As a statue. Great big furry geek gamer.
For the Confederate statues, I've said the whole time, just, keep it with the Civil War and just, replace them with Grant and Sherman statues.
Well, how about, I would put up, oh my God, I just tweeted out the drunk history on her. Harriet Tubman.
Harry Tubman, yeah.
That's a good one, too.
Yeah, because, there's a great drunk history.
Sherman. Did you say Sherman? Yeah.
Sherman. Yeah. Just because the people that
up in Georgia?
the people that venerate the people that venerate Confederate generals hate General Sherman.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. He needs to have a huge equestrian statue in downtown
Atlanta. Yeah.
Absolutely.
With an eternal
would be
flame
good,
outside of it.
Because probably the place for
flame,
those type of I guess the place for those type of statues is probably for them to be curated and to be put into a museum, and then at least you get the choice. But when it's a public utility, you don't really have a choice to say, okay, I don't want to engage with this artwork.
No, it's in your face.
Yeah.
Can I tell you guys a little bit about Aaron Swartz?
Go on.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is
awesome.
looking familiar. Maybe I did see that at some point.
So, yes, despite the many hundred thousands of words that have been written about Aaron Swartz since his suicide last month, this is a couple years ago, there remain a number of unanswered questions about the computer prodigy turned political activist. Many have wondered about the seriousness of the crime alleged in his massive download of JSTOR, the online archive of academic articles, for which federal prosecutors obtained 13-count indictment and could have sent him to prison for decades. Others speculated about his mental health. He had written about his own struggle with depression and the role that might have played. But perhaps the most mystifying question was why he was so preoccupied with JSTOR in the first place. He had nurtured a soft spot for so-called open access issues, removing barriers to the free flow of information since he was a teenager. By the time he began downloading JSTOR in September of 2010, he was almost 24 and seemingly far more interested in overt political activism. He founded a group and this was the guy who tried to liberate knowledge on the internet. So just a moment of pour one out. And was charged with 13 counts by U.S. federal authorities. So, anyway, getting back statues. Yeah, put them in a museum. Just like put the Indiana Jones. It belongs in a museum.
Well, I think there's.
I'd melt.
Okay, go ahead.
No, man, I'd melt them down. Most of it's made out of bronze.
Yeah, I did.
We could use the tin content to make more cell phones.
Well, Kevin and I had a discussion about how it's very, very bad for bronze statues to pour like tomato juice or tomato paste or chopped tomatoes, because it actually starts a chemical process within the bronze that can't be stopped by preservers. And so it would be, the worst thing you could do to a Confederate thing is just dump a bunch of tomatoes on it and let it sit for 2 or 3 hours. Because, that would be, just a warning of...
Ketchup balloons.
Don't throw rotten tomatoes at Confederate statues.
Yeah, unless you want to do permanent damage, which of course we wouldn't advocate for that on,
No.
YouTube compliant. So
yeah. Well, maybe in Minecraft.
Yeah, in Minecraft you can throw tomatoes.
One of the things about preserving all the old statues, though, especially the Confederate, a lot of the Confederate ones, were these things are episodic in history. They're not. They weren't built continuously. Over time, there was whenever there was a big reaction to Black people getting rights, or to the push for Black people to have rights, or like at the 50-year anniversary of the Civil War, things like that, you get a rush of Confederate statues, and a lot of those are really, really crappy, cheap ass, things that if you try to lift them off their base, it'd probably crumble anyway, or crumple if you put any weight on them. So I think just from that point of view, I think there's a case to be made that there needs to, if we put them in museums, or if we limit them to like Confederate cemeteries or things like that, or maybe even battlefields, at locations, significant, like the wheat field or the cornfield in Gettysburg for Pickett's charge. Maybe if there is a statue of Pickett there, maybe that's appropriate. I don't know, but I think there needs to be some kind of process in place, and I think we need to have a conversation about that. But especially the statues that were put up as a fuck you to Black people, I think they need to be put down because their history is so toxic.
Like 99.95% of those statues at that time. Yeah.
If that's what it is, then I guess that's what I'm saying.
And we're still not sure about that 0.05%.
Yeah, maybe round it up.
Yeah. So, what else is on people's mind?
Continuing from the freedom of information and stuff like that. If it's all right with everyone, I'd like to present something. Actually,
Yeah.
I will present this. I will present this shit if it's allowed.
Yeah.
Hey,
Well,
let's see. A Chrome tab. Yes. This is actually a very big irony of it. Okay, can you guys see it?
it's
No.
not yet. Now we can. It's coming through.
Okay.
Oh,
It's
yes.
coming up.
Okay. So this is called the Uncensored Library. It is a Minecraft server. This is slow as bollocks. But yes, it is a resource that allows for the making of media. This includes newspaper reports, books, censored content, banned lists, all kinds of things, to be fully accessible to anywhere because of some very interesting bits of like loopholes and stuff like that that's present in the world. You just need a copy of Minecraft, which is dirt cheap, free. And yeah,
That's great. Was that
it's really, really
2020?
cool.
March 2020, or is
This
this
now,
earlier?
it's still on. Yeah.
Okay.
This was, I believe this was March 2019. Like I heard about it a little while ago, or it might be this year as well. The point is that this has been actually like one of the multiple ways that people have been kind of like using weird loopholes in cyberspace to ostensibly like free up information and give access to things. This is where
That's
it
great.
is. Like this is it looks terrifying, I know, but this is actually a Minecraft server. Like this is the entirety of it,
Yeah.
and your job is, and all you do is that you go in and you find thousands of books which like exist as like objects in the world of Minecraft, and you can just pick them out and all
Yes.
sorts of different people.
Yeah.
Yeah. These are people who have contributed stuff. People who have done all kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I've done through my work was I took a course on Creative Commons licensing. And it was certainly the case if you look at the formation of of copyright. It really just sort of comes at it from the idea of property and profit. The assumptions, the capitalist assumptions that are built into it are people are going to make things, and then if anyone can take their ideas and make money off of it, they're not going to have the motivation to make things. So what we have to do is make sure that when you make something, it's 100% yours. And then for a while, copyright was like for 50 years on an article or something. But well, it's called the Protect Mickey Mouse legislation, where they pushed it to 75 years after the death of the creator, and now 100 years after the death of the creator. And all of this intellectual property gets locked up in the estates of people or in the corporations that benefit from it. But if you had reasonable amounts of copyright, I don't see why 50 years after the death of the creator is not a reasonable amount of time. You would have just a complete flood of publicly available information. And there was a court case they tried to sue about the length of the copyright, and that failed at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court upheld the current sort of interpretations of it. So they created an entirely new form of copyright law where it's some rights reserved. And the rights that you can reserve are like, put my name on this if you're going to use it. And that's it. Otherwise, it's free to distribute, free to copy. You can take parts of it. You can change parts of it. And there are various ways you can restrict your work for like no derivatives if you want it to maintain it in its entirety. Or maybe you have a share alike license, which means anyone who uses it also has to make a Creative Commons version of what they're doing to spread the copyright freedom. So finding ways around it and using open access and publishing under Creative Commons licensing is a way to get around the ways that corporations or companies tend to use copyright for a long time in order to profit off of it.
In your version of intellectual property, how would you set the creator on that? Because, well, it wasn't a thing when copyright law existed or when was originally made, but now a lot of intellectual property is created by a corporation the creator is a corporation rather than an actual artist or a
Yes.
singular person that has definitely a finite lifespan, unlike a corporation which theoretically could last the entirety of human
It's
existence.
immortal. It could potentially be immortal. The way that it works is initially when you create something, it's yours. The copyright is yours. You can sell your copyright though. So you can sell the license to your work to somebody else so that they own the license to it, but you still maintain what they call moral rights, which is the right to have yourself acknowledged as the author. And also there's something like if someone really, in some countries, if someone really perverts your work and makes it into something terrible, like you can object to that use of it on sort of like it's a violation of your integrity because your name is associated with it. But if you work for when I work for Gasis and I'm doing some work, the copyright at the end of the day doesn't belong with me because I'm an employee of the company, and so the company ends up. This is how, I don't know if you know Bratz dolls, but there was a woman who worked for Mattel, I think, and she had some ideas. And they didn't want to do it at Mattel, so she went away and she created the Bratz line, and the Mattel tried to claim that as she was inspired for that line while she still worked at Mattel, so Mattel actually owned the rights to the product. Yeah, so you can sell your rights to something, like rights to a book, and then once you've sold it, you kind of can't complain about too much what they do with it, as long as they don't, turn it into something criminal or whatever. So that's once a company has it, they have it until the license runs out, and of course they've got the money to lobby Congress to keep extending those copyrights. So like Steamboat Willie, it was already supposed to be in the public domain decades ago, and now it's not going to be in the public domain until 2024, unless Disney, of course, decides to lobby Congress to extend the copyright protection again.
So they're going to lobby Congress.
Well, of course, yeah.
It's not really an if.
Yeah. So,
do you think that the CEO of Antifa would be particularly interested in copywriting anything?
Should I ask?
Do you happen to know if there's any kind of diversification? Is there any diversification coming? Because seriously, now, at this point, I've been working continuously to destabilize governments and stuff like that, and I really would like to get paid at some point. I'd really like the CEO to kind of talk to me.
Well, technically, I can advise you.
Supervisor. You have to go up the chain of command.
Yes. And you have to make sure you have your loyalty debit card as well, so you're getting your points.
Hey, I've got the script, okay? I've got script, okay? But the sad thing is that it happens to be pieces of paper written in catnip. So at some point I'm gonna
First, you have to talk to your local manager of Antifa, and then the regional manager of Antifa, and then perhaps the No, I've taken this analogy too far.
Well, the thing is, there are people there are a lot of people that have been convinced by the right wing and Trump and folks that's actually kind of how it works. That there is such a thing as Antifa is an organization that can be identified and dealt with like the Klan or something like that. And there really isn't.
No, I just published.
Oh
no, you go ahead.
It's honestly a sad misconception that occurs from my philosophical point of view. It's actually to do with capitalism, because all ills come from capitalism. Lots of people think that there's a pyramid and then there's somebody at the top, or it's all part of a build-up of things. Mm-hmm. I mean, here is a question, right? Who runs the Taliban? Who owns the Taliban? You know, lots of people would probably have said like Osama bin Laden or something like that, when actually that is the antithesis of what was going on. Osama bin Laden was a leader. He was loathed by the larger majority, but the people he was in charge with, you know, he got along pretty well. But this is a decentralized like group, and sadly, people attach like the concept of like a corporation, the concept of like, okay, there is a ladder structure to this. There's a president who you can blow the head off of and, you know, scar a country for the rest of its natural life. But that doesn't actually that doesn't work. And sadly, it kind of results in like Iraq getting bombed to shit or any other thing like that.
Yeah. I think people don't quite understand how an organization cannot have. How can it be a loosely affiliated thing? I think unless you maybe participate in that kind of stuff. I mean, everything that we think about in American civic life, as it were, has an organization, whether it's the Kiwanis Club or the Freemasons or whatever. Even in like a local soccer team, there is a hierarchy, there is leadership, there are people organizing things, and it takes a lot of thinking outside the box to try to conceive of Antifa not being like that. So I think people are falling for like a fallacy of what they assume is the case.
Yeah,
you know?
You can see that with the Black Lives Matter, because I think that, I don't know, after like so many years, because there probably were teething problems when they first took action, but this time around, it's like they've gone for a very grassroots, because you can see a difference between their methods of protest. Like if it's somewhere like, I don't know, because I know a friend of mine who lives in Fargo, and it was a very different. So it seems like a grassroots bottom up rather than a top down sort of structure, and it was organized in such a way, because I think in some place like Fargo or something like that, the police are sort of in agreement, thinking, yeah, this department needs to be cleaned up. And so it was organized accordingly in a very different way. And so I think the biggest problem is the lack of cohesiveness. Like that's the problem I had with when there's people from other organizations. So if it's Antifa or it's just or anyone who's going along to riot or loot, and they're doing that against the wishes of the Black Lives Matter movement, that's where I start to disagree with. I start to get concerned.
Yeah, I'm kind of like a stay in your lane. Like go to you when it's a WTO protest or the fascists show up. Yep, but actually, like Antifa isn't even the problem in this case. I just shared an article about Antifa not being anywhere and not like no one Antifa associated getting arrested.
No, some sort of anarchist organized.
Yeah,
like, whatever it is. It's a.
Yeah, when I was doing the protest in London in 2010 against the coalition government cuts to education, student tuition fees, the NHS, and we marched all day peacefully, and then Black Bloc started to show up at the end of the night, and then they started pulling together police barricades and fencing, and they started to light things on fire, and the entire 6 o'clock news was just about the fires and the protests and the violence and the smashing, and it was our entire message for that day about cuts to the NHS, about tuition fees, was lost. And so I understand, like, there are times and places to have those protests, but what pissed me off, and what pisses me off when I see it with Black Lives Matters, is now is not your time, stay in your lane. Like, don't take over our media focus and our opportunity to get your message out there, because this isn't your time. Like, this is our time to talk about this stuff. We organize this. And so, yeah, when I saw Black people having to stop white people from destroying things, it broke my heart to think they have to police the police, they have to police white supremacists, and they have to police people who are there who maybe think they're being allies, but they're really not. And it's just all this extra burden when they're just trying to get people to focus on police brutality against them because they're dying. And that's so I don't like, like for anarchists, when it's WTO time, go crazy, do what you want, do your protest, do your capitalist protest, right? And then maybe BLM will come and support you. But right now, just don't take the focus away.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It's because that's the thing with certain racial issues. It's like that there are so many conversations we've got to have between. It's often even within the left. It's not even addressing centrists or right wing people. It's within the left, we have to think about because there's instances I've seen where it's I don't know, it's just people sort of taking the mic away, and or even the topic of race is still, you bring it up and you can get it's usually the same sort of reaction you'll get. It can be very hostile.
Hello.
Oh, hey Joe, was that you popping up or Life? Oh, Kitty.
Oh, the kitty.
Oh, we need a cat
I was
break.
saying hello to my cat.
Yeah. And, I did have someone who was a black anarchist saying, well, I agree with this. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not talking to you. Like, I'm talking to the white people over here who are getting complaints. Like, if there's a discussion to be had about anarchism or whatever, however you want to protest as you lead this movement, that's not me. That's not my place to say. But what I see is people who are saying, white people, you're getting in our way. You're messing our stuff up. And that's what I'm trying to give a lift the voices of. Because I want us to be good allies, not bad allies.
Right. I agree. And the right and Trump and especially are capitalizing on that and making confusion with that, of saying you're all the same.
Mm-hmm.
And the vast majority are just peaceful protesters who are petitioning, are peacefully assembling to petition their government for a redress of grievances, which is directly from the Constitution. So I don't know where he could have any real problem with that, other than he doesn't give a fuck about the Constitution. But then you got people that are messing with that from a number of different angles. I don't think it's just left. I think there's all kinds of different folk that are kicking in and making problems. And it's and the people that would normally be charged with sorting all that out are the ones that are causing, the police and the administration are the people causing that confusion and benefiting from that confusion. And that is really difficult. I saw, well, and a little bit lighter note or slightly different note, I saw an article just before we came on air about somebody who held a gun on two people and was trying to do, I think, a citizen's arrest of two people who looked Antifa.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Not doing anything, they weren't doing anything. They just looked Antifa. And so he pulled a gun and said, you're Antifa. I don't know, citizen is arresting or what the hell thought he was going to do there. But that is directly from Trump and Barr and those folks saying it's Antifa is the enemy. And Antifa is sitting there going,
we're not even there.
Well, Antifa, there are Antifa people there. It's just not, it's not an organization that's saying go and do this stuff.
No, yeah. But even like Antifa people aren't showing up in there to kick things off, but they're getting blamed. Yeah, it's just, it's like Acorn.
Exactly, absolutely, just like Acorn. Yeah. And
something to help people who are poor and not white. Oh my gosh, it must be a threat.
Yeah, I hate those people.
Yeah. Poor and or not white, and poor white people and poor people of color, because when you try to help poor people, that's a threat.
Yeah, well, I hate poor people of color. I thought I think I should.
Yeah. I don't know if people know Acorn was a citizens group that was demonized by like the Bush administration, and they were blamed for doing voter fraud, which they didn't do. And they were sort of like the citizen activist version of like the demonization of Antifa. Before it was Antifa, they had Acorn that they could put up there as fear the socialists or whatever.
And who was that did that white asshole that keeps doing these undercover badly,
the Veritas people?
Yeah, Project Veritas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were behind taking down with false accusations. Yeah, Acorn.
They took down Acorn, and they affected election. That affected elections in the future, because Acorn was very good at getting people to vote.
Yep.
Who the Republicans didn't want to vote.
Of course, because when people vote, they lose. Sorry, this became a very Americentric conversation.
I'm honestly very interested. I went about looking. This last couple of weeks, I've been very interested in like looking up the stuff behind things. So like because of the protests, because of the statue defacing. Does it count as defacing if you just chuck it into a fucking river?
I think that's a higher level. I think you get an extra achievement for that.
Fair enough.
I mean, eventually the river will erode the face away. So.
Well, they did fish it out, and I think they said that they're going to leave the paint on it, on the face of the statue of the guy who got chucked in Bristol, because it's now part of history, and they're going to stick it in the back of some museum, some dusty corner. So.
Yeah, they're going to be putting it in. They have said that they're going to be renovating. They're going to be like restoring it to a certain degree because there has been like like it like can't stand on its own anymore. It's been twisted a little bit, but whatever.
I was twisted to begin with in mine, but that's probably not.
No, it don't matter. Like the thing that I thought was a really interesting bit of stuff is to do with like how people view how people have viewed things in like present day. I guess you could say fiction or media or whatever you'd want to talk about it. For instance, one of the ones that I thought was really interesting, bit of tidbit was cowboys didn't have a lot of guns. Mm-hmm. Turns out that people were all about like, oh yeah, we wander around and we have 6 shooters and we have 2 of them, and it's like, no, you'd be lucky if one person had a gun. In a group of 10.
Yeah, and towns would actually. Yeah, and towns would make you turn in your gun before you came into the city center, because the sheriffs knew if you went in and got drunk, it would just turn into a bloodbath. So you actually had to surrender your guns to go into inside some city limits. You don't see that in the films.
It's very strict on this side of the world. I mean, even if I take my butter knife out to like make a sandwich or something, the cops are on the door just because I've got the butter knife. I mean, that's how. where there's very little leeway.
Yeah, well, you are. If you didn't have laws like that, you would be murdering each other in schools and things like that. We don't have that problem over here.
Well, I mean, Australians already murder the shit out of the concept of food, so I'm, go with it.
Well, look what they have to work with. Everything
one of the best. Australia has some of the best food in all the world, and you decide to fucking barbecue it on a bloody grill.
That's Wisconsin barbecue. Barbecue is don't knock barbecue. That's a Wisconsin thing.
Yeah, but they do lots of things.
It's your birthday, so I'm being nice to you. Yeah,
well, they do prawns in the barbie. I've heard.
No, we don't. They say like the shrimp on the barbie. Like we never ever do that. Like that's it's like not that I'd ever eat because I don't eat seafood or anything like that. But it's that's what they do. They always serve it like cold. I've never ever seen it barbecued. It's like one of those things that they made up.
Yeah, it sounded good at the time.
You want to know what it was? You want to know what it was? It was some British prick showed up one day, saw somebody drunk off his mind, just decided, you know what, I've got a barbecue right here, I'm going to put a fucking shrimp on it. And it immediately caught fire, and the British were just like, yes, this is how they live now. Savages.
Well, the British guy looked at it and said, well, that's food. It's just, I'm British, I would call that food. Because Britain has bad food. No, that's not.
Well, no, they've imported. Well, no, they've got better food because everybody else came in to visit and brought their food with them.
Right. Well, no, they're not.
It's one of the reasons why
they were brought there by the empire.
Well, yeah, not in the modern days. There are actually people who willingly go to the UK and start restaurants these days. So, from all over. But yeah, initially they needed. They were driven out by the crappy diets. Doesn't excuse it, but if you've eaten British food,
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Cooked breakfast is, pretty tasty, even with the runny beans.
Oh, I love a fry up me.
It takes a little while, but every British person, everybody who kind of like, doesn't have some kind of mix of whatever it would be, different cultures or anything, they come from Britain, that kind of idea. They eventually get very defensive when you start slagging off the food and everything. And it's actually fantastically funny because whenever I meet someone and, they're like, oh, well, I'm a student, I'm from America, I'm from whatever. And I'm like, so how are you enjoying things here? And they go, oh, it's really fun. It's very good, everything. I was like, you enjoying the food? And they're like, yeah. And I go, yeah, it's shit, innit? And everybody, like all the British people are immediately like, Laith, what the fuck are you? Why are you being such a grump? And then the foreigner just kind of goes, yes, my God, what's wrong with these people? God Almighty.
The Great Britain, where the base food was so bad they needed to make an empire to get spices.
Yeah. Well, I know that there's definitely a joke in Black communities in America about how bland white people eat their food. It's just like, you don't have any taste in your food. I don't understand what's the point of putting that food in your mouth if you can't taste it? So yeah, maybe there's just something about the white palate, or like sort of like coming from European cultures where there is just people are afraid of spices or denied them. It just has a really bad food legacy.
My apologies.
we see you now. That's good. Do you have Bird?
Where's Bird?
Oh, she's asleep.
Oh, okay.
She's sort of up in the corner.
Okay, I think the last time he came on, it was to show Bird. I like Bird.
Yeah. If you guys have a chance, there's a really excellent episode of Black Jeopardy from Saturday Night Live. And it has, I can't remember because it's a long time since I've seen Black Panther, but the character of Black Panther, the main character in Black Panther, is like shows up as one of the contestants. But of course, even though he's from Africa, he doesn't understand African American culture per se. And the episode is sort of like him getting the hang of it. And by the end, he's like, "Oh no, Karen, don't bring that boring ass potato salad to my." So. That was Saturday Night Live. It's Black Jeopardy, where they they do the Jeopardy spoof, but all the it's written and performed by the African American or Black cast. So there's also a really, really funny one with Tom Hanks, as well. That was like very deftly done. Kind of because he plays a MAGA guy, but it kind of gently pokes fun at them without really, like kicking up a storm. So yeah, I thought that they tried to do that well. So you can check that out. All right.
I have been having a lot of problem with my back and hip, so I am at the point where I need to bugger off.
I was actually going to say, because I did a 2-hour show with Kevin, then a 4-hour D&D game, and then a 2-hour show, and I did my book thing on Saturday as well. I'm also a bit tired from streaming.
You've been like streamed out.
I've been streaming I'd probably done 10 hours over the last 48
Yeah, I mean, I've been I was busy with my channel as well, pretty much. I mean, it's because I was never really a big YouTuber, because I never had any kind of focus, because it's such an eclectic sort of I always change my mind about what kind of content I want to make. Like, I've always made my music video. That's been the only constant thing, but the focus, I always shift my focus. I don't know what to talk about. I'm too sport for choice.
Yeah, I kind of do the same, but I just get on the camera and ramble. But yeah, so I want to thank everyone for stopping by, and Laith too. Thanks for sharing the secret Minecraft library.
Yes, that is very cool.
Happy birthday to Dippy, who's in the audience.
To who?
Oh, who's it? Oh, yeah.
So it's Dippy.
Dippy. Yeah, you have a shared birthday. Yes. Shallots?
Oh.
What was that?
Happy birthday.
Okay, happy birthday.
Let's see.
It just occurred to me that we didn't bring up Flag Day at all, which is fine, because we spent a decent amount of time on statues, which is a similar theme with symbolism and how people remember things.
Yeah, Flag. Well,
yeah.
An interesting story about that's related to my birthday, which is to bring it back to the important part of this. My son and I. because my birthday is obviously the day after Flag Day. When my son and I talk about my birthday and planning things for my birthday, the code is, we're going to get together for ellipsis Flag Day, and what do I want as a gift for ellipsis Flag Day? So that's in fact he just messaged me a few seconds ago. So
That's very good.
I'm going to have to talk to him, and he's going to be asking me about Flag Day. So I don't want it to end.
The queer flags.
Well, there we go. It doesn't. Yeah,
all the LGBT flags.
Flag, just the name doesn't specify flag. I suppose we could use any flag.
Yeah. Have you seen have you seen what my flag looks like? Like this is my letter of the alphabet. That's like at the end of it. It's like what is it? Purple, white, grey, and black. So this is you can't really make it up. Yeah.
What's the name? Non-bi.
Yeah, that's the ace flag.
Oh,
nice.
I'm so sorry.
Oh.
That's good. That's a good flag for Flag Day.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I know many people that could fly that flag.
All right. Well, hey, all of you, be well, be safe, be corona-free until the next time. Oh yeah. Tom.
Remember about my birthday fundraiser for the Bail Project? Yep. It's in the description of the video if you look at it later, and I put it in the chat for anybody who is in the chat. I hope that's still. I
put it on the screen there. And you want to say a little bit about the Bail Project? What it is?
It's in America, and I suppose other places, but in America, people who are arrested and charged with a crime often have to spend time in jail before the hearings. And we have bail, which allows people to leave jail and leave a deposit behind to say, yeah, I'm going to come to court. Well, that bail system oppresses poor people poorer and minority communities more than anything else. And also, in these days, it keeps protesters in jail when they don't need to be there because they're going to come for their court hearing. So the Bail Project takes donations and pays people's bail, and also agitates to get rid of cash bail. So,
excellent. Yeah. So if you can.
That's what it's for.
Yeah, if you can, please support it. And if you can't, maybe pass it around the information so other people know about it.
That's like I said, because I want a lot of people to contribute to my version of it so that I look good.
Because that's your motivation, yes.
That's my motivation. I don't give a shit about, poor people protest to hell with it, but I want to look good to my friends.
By the way, Dippy says that they're 49 years old, but none the wiser. So that's what I'm aiming for.
Well, I'm 71 today. I'll be 72 tomorrow if I survive. And I am less the wise. Much wiser when I was much younger.
All right. Well,
remember, everybody, doing good things for selfish reasons is still doing good things.
There we go.
And on that, yeah, and on that moral high point, that moral objective or objectively ethical statement, goodbye from me and goodbye from everyone, and we'll all say a happy birthday, Tom, as the way to say goodbye. So, goodbye from me and goodbye from everyone else. Everyone say happy birthday, Tom.
Happy birthday, Tom.
Happy birthday, Tom.
Oh, happy birthday! I want to be part of the group. Yes, thank you. I appreciate it.
We got that in.